Okay, I've started the recording. It looks like most folks have come into the room. Thank you all for joining us. This is our third in a series of webinars on our innovation grants. This webinar is geared towards our community inclusion projects. And so we have an exciting lineup of speakers for you today. Just a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our ODES Innovations webpage. If you missed the previous webinars, I invite you to go view the recordings that are currently posted. All attendees are muted. ASL and CART captions are available today. If you cannot hear me or if your audio drops out, please use the audio settings to change your speaker output. We have enabled the Q&A box, so please use this to submit questions to the speakers. We will have Q&A actually in the middle of the presentations and also at the end today. You should see a show captions button in order to show those CART captions or view the transcript. And during those Q&A portions, we invite you to use the raise hand button in order to signify that you'd like to ask a question audibly. So with that, we'll get started and I'll turn this over to our Grand Master of Ceremonies, Doug Keast with the National Disability Institute.
Thank you, Miranda. And hello and welcome everyone to the final installment of the 3 webinars featuring Maine's Innovation Grant pilots. This series provides us with an opportunity to meet the leaders from each of the 19 projects selected by the Office on Aging and Disability Services, or ODES. Maine is investing in innovation pilots in partnership with each of these featured agencies to learn together how these practices can improve services and positively shape the waiver services in the future. Today, we'll focus on 7 of the 19 projects that include a focus on community inclusion. You will see the vision of innovation and service of each project, as well as gain an idea of what we all hope to learn through each project's implementation. During today's event, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of the presenters, and we ask that as we go, you share your questions in the question box. My name is Doug Keast, and I'm a project manager with the National Disability Institute. NDI has been engaged by the Maine Office on Aging and Disability Services to administer the projects, and with ODES, support each of the projects in meeting their objectives with the resources available to us. We have a team of subject matter experts and evaluators working with the implementation team and engaged partners with each project to go along with the administrative team handling the logistics of contracting and payment. All in all, between our team and the extended team with Maine ODES, there's a lot of investment and support in the partnership with the agency representatives speaking today in their visions for service innovation. Before we start with the project presentations, I'd like to first introduce you to a couple of folks that will help us with the context for the importance of these projects. Their combined experience in the field of disability services and systems change make them natural leaders for the Innovation Grant Initiative for the ODES and NDI teams working with the projects that are presenting today. Betsy Hopkins is the Associate Director of Developmental Disability and Brain Injury Services for the Office on Aging and Disability Services, and Dr. Rebecca Salon is a Senior Consultant from our team with the National Disability Institute. Next slide, please. The projects featured in today's webinar include Disability Rights Maine with launching and expanding youth self-advocacy in Maine, Independence Association, the My Community Link project, Living Innovations with opening the door to shared living, Momentum, innovating reliable transportation to work, Rehab Without Walls, HCBS Neurorehabilitation, filling a need for brain injury survivors, Skills Inc., driver education, and the University of Maine, enhanced behavior support. Next slide, please. To get us started, Betsy, would you like to discuss the importance of these innovation partnerships for the state of Maine?
Sure. Thanks, Doug, and welcome everyone. Happy to join you here this afternoon on this third webinar of our series, as Doug has described. And, from the very beginning, we were so excited about the opportunity to offer these pilot opportunities for people to apply for. We had a lot of good applications, and we reviewed a lot of grant applications, and the 19 that we have chosen are ones that we're really excited to move forward on for so many reasons. These pilot innovative services were evaluated to help identify effective practices that Maine is really interested in moving forward with. We have done a lot of stakeholder work over the course of the last couple of years, listened to people talk about gaps in services and where they and or their family members would like to be as they're in our system or receiving services in our system. And so many of these pilots that you'll hear about today and that you've heard about previously, I think are addressing some of the gaps in our system of services. We're really hopeful that these innovative services will increase waiver members' opportunities to access, live, and work in their communities overall. And more specifically, some of the effective services that are shown will be identified from project evaluation and may be integrated into our new lifespan waiver. I'm not going to go into detail about the lifespan waiver. We do have the link to the lifespan waiver webpage if anybody's interested in learning more about that. But that the waiver in and of itself is what we're hoping will provide some opportunities for more accessible services for individuals that will fit their needs, their individual needs as they talk about them in their person-centered planning process. I can't tell you how really happy we are to be working with NDI on this project. Frankly, we would not be able to do it without their support. And Doug gave a brief overview of some of the services and supports that they're providing this project and the work that they're doing with many of the grantees. But I would like to turn it over to Rebecca to talk a little bit more from a national perspective about the work that we're doing with them. So thank you. Rebecca?
Thanks so much, Betsy. For each of these webinars, excuse me, we like to give a national perspective. The HCBS settings rule has a strong emphasis on community inclusion to ensure that HCBS services support people to have access to and participate in the same ways as everyone else does in their communities. And the projects you'll hear about today all support that goal. One of the projects, as you heard, is on self-advocacy support and training focused on youth. Self-advocacy support is integral to community inclusion, since people cannot exercise their rights or make choices or fully participate if they don't have a voice. So we're very excited about that project. Other projects include the development of a community integration scheduling app. There are projects focused on people transitioning to more inclusive living situations and shared living opportunities, on the development of alternative transportation for people to get to work, another on driver education, and one on enhanced behavioral supports. Again, important so that people can fully be included in the life of their communities. Next slide, please. From a national perspective, Maine has embraced a few frameworks that support person-centered services and the HCBS settings rule. One is the Charting the Life course framework, which was created to help people and families of all abilities and all ages develop a vision for a good life, and for them to think about what they need to know and do, identify how to develop supports, and discover what it takes to live the lives they want to live. One of the things I especially like about the Life course framework is that it uses an integrated support star that guides people and their support networks to envision ways to integrate multiple types of supports into people's lives. These, of course, include the publicly funded or privately funded eligibility-based supports, but the integrated support star also includes community supports that are available to anyone, relationship-based supports, ways that technology can support people, and the personal strengths and assets of an individual and their family. And this gives a more comprehensive way of viewing supports and opens doors to community inclusion. In each webinar, we've provided you with links to resources, and here are 3 links we thought might be of special interest. The first, on exploring the life stages, focuses on transition to adulthood, and aging. So there are resources at that link for each of those. The second focuses on exploring life domains, which provides information on daily life and employment, community living, advocacy and engagement, healthy living, social connections, spirituality, and more. So again, if you click on that link, there are resources to provide you with support for those. And the last one is on the integrated support star that reflects what might support someone to have a good life, the things that we just mentioned: personal strengths and assets, relationships, technology, and so on. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in exploring charting the life course further, here's a link to their Maine website, which has a very extensive library of resources. I encourage you to go there. There are 2 organizations, the Institute on Community Integration and the Institute for Community Inclusion, both called ICI, that also provide lots of useful resources. So the ICI at the University of Minnesota has a research and training center on community living, and there you'll find studies that they've done and reports and resources on community living outcomes, the impact of online direct support professional training on the workforce and on outcomes for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, competency-based training and how that impacts outcomes, how to support self-determination, and much, much more. They also have a rehabilitation and research training center on HCBS outcome measurement that includes the work of the National Quality Forum. So again, I encourage you to scroll around their website. ICI at UMass Boston also has many areas of emphasis. The ones most relevant to your work in Maine relate to competitive integrated employment, education, and theirs spans pre-K through college, community life, and healthcare. And they run projects that you may be familiar with, including the State Employment Leadership Network, SELN, Think Work, Think College. If you've looked for data on your state or another state, they run the statedata.info, community life engagement, the Center for Youth Voice, Youth Choice, which has a youth ambassador curriculum that's being explored and adapted by one of the innovation projects that you'll hear about today, and many more projects. So again, we encourage you to look at their website. And finally, Maine is introducing the supports intensity scale from the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And it's a standardized assessment tool that measures the patterns and intensity of supports that someone might need to be successful in community settings. They also offer a person-centered planning guide that planning teams can use to identify and address a person's support needs that then can be measured by the support intensity scale, so you can see progress over time. So we wanted to give you links to these resources and kind of a perspective of what's happening elsewhere related to community inclusion. And with that as a context, back to you, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And next slide, please. Now it is with great pleasure that I introduce our first speakers, Dan Kipp and Aidan Rudolph. Dan is Disability Rights Maine's project director for this youth self-advocacy innovation. Dan received a bachelor's degree in sociology and women's and gender studies in 2014, and since then has served as an educator and advocate with a local domestic violence resource center, a director of a national nonprofit's work engaging Maine schools and youth in sexual violence prevention and response initiatives, a trainer in empowerment, self-defense locally and nationally, and a facilitator of the Men's Story Project at Colby College. Aidan Rudolph is a recent Bangor High School 2023 graduate. Through their personal experience with disability, he is looking forward to connecting with and helping young people express themselves as a self-advocate trainer. While at Bangor High School, they were an Olympias leader in the Olympia Snow Women's Leadership Institute, as well as a participant of Bangor's swim team and pep band program. Dan and Aiden, welcome to this platform and thank you for agreeing to join us today.
Thank you for having us, Doug. Hi there, everyone. Again, my name is Dan. My pronouns are he, him. I am the project director with Disability Rights Maine on this grant-funded work, and I've got Aiden here with me. And Aiden, actually, we are going to be able to share the video quickly, introducing Jahim as well. So would you mind introducing yourself, and then we'll bring in Jahim?
Yeah, hi, my name is Aiden Rudolph. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm one of the self-advocate trainers at DRM.
And now, if possible, we'd love to be able to share our screen because it's really important to us that all team members on this project, and especially the self-advocates, are represented. Jahim doesn't work today, but he is a huge part of this project, and he recorded a video prior to this presentation introducing himself and introducing the project itself.
Dan, I'm not hearing any audio. You might have to reshare. Make sure you select the button to share your audio.
Okay, thank you. Share sound, thank you. All right, let's try that again.
Hello, my name is Jahim Franklin. I am the self-advocacy trainer at Disability Rights of Maine. I am working on a project called Launching and Expanding Youth Self-Advocacy. Also, I train young people from ages 14 to 25 how to be self-advocates. The objective of the project is to expand self-advocacy in the youth population here in Maine. Self-advocacy is where a person can speak up for themselves and taking action in their lives. I hope you can join me on this project and help us achieve our goal of helping people to become self-advocates.
So thank you, Jahim. Aiden, want to check in with you. Do you want to take the next part, or would you like me to go?
You can go.
Okay. So yeah, it's really important to me that Aiden and Jahim were representing on this work, even though neither of them are technically supposed to be working today. They're working part-time. So I think I'll take it from here. If you all want to start sharing screen again, you can do that. Thank you. So just to continue that project overview that Jahim started, he mentioned training ages 14 to 25. Objective is to expand self-advocacy with young people in Maine. He gave that definition of self-advocacy, and we just wanted to name how important self-advocacy is. It's helping people reclaim their voice, their choice, and their power. There's a lot of different ways that looks. It goes to like actual, like affecting one's concrete lived reality, but it also goes to empowered mindsets as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The three main ways that we are promoting self-advocacy within our project include, first and foremost, as I've been stressing, hiring Jahim and Aiden, and also we're looking for one more self-advocate, giving young people with disabilities the opportunity to be leaders within this movement. The movement that they're creating is based on the two other big, kind of big deliverables within this project are creating self-advocacy chapters. This is a place where young people can be themselves authentically and then build community with other people who understand them. And from that place of connection, find power, find empowerment. We're also hoping to create a similar space, but in a different kind of context with students at Bedford High School, where we'll be facilitating a youth ambassador curriculum, as was mentioned, from the Center for Youth Voice, Youth Choice. And that'll be kind of like a more intensive experience, fast tracking them towards advocacy, where the other one is a little bit more of a community building, a little more free form and open-ended sort of deliverable. If y'all wouldn't mind sharing the next slide, thank you. So I don't think any of these strategies are necessarily innovative in that they've never been done before, but they are, I think, important within this work. The first and foremost, paying youth self-advocates, again, having them not only have leadership opportunities, but employment opportunities. I think there's a connection there to the lifespan waiver as well. You know, there's going to be a chance for people and young people with disabilities to be employers, let alone employees. So this is kind of part of creating that infrastructure and modeling what we're hoping to achieve a little bit down the line. The strategy of creating spaces where young people can connect and then expand into empowering mindsets. This is something that we want to spend a lot of time on, especially in our 2 self-advocacy chapters, is really building up a belief system. Since, as we'll talk about in a second, young people encounter a lot of limiting beliefs, and especially young people with disabilities because of ableism, because of adultism. Therefore, we think it's really important to, as a strategy, take some time to actively combat those limiting belief systems and step into our own power and develop this, this belief in ourselves, our worth, and our rights. Another innovative strategy, obviously developing the skill sets for self-advocacy and taking on a range of self-advocacy projects. That's like the natural outgrowth of those empowered mindsets. And all of this is going to be done in a sort of peer education model with ground up grassroots organizing, all with the intent of expanding the impact and capacity for youth self-advocacy as a movement in Maine. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, adultism and ableism, and then internalized ableism are the biggest things that we are combating. Those are really kind of, they can be nebulous, they can be amorphous, but they have real effects on young people with disabilities. And so that's one of the 2 main things that we are hoping to address through this work of youth organizing, youth education, and youth empowerment. Next slide, please. The big thing that we hope to learn is, like, what we know already going into this, that young people are hungry and thirsty for empowering experiences. And we know that young people have the ability to teach and lead one another. What we're really hoping to learn is whether this curriculum, this youth ambassador curriculum, as well as the formation of these youth chapters, is going to be an effective way to actually build capacity for young people to take advantages of those opportunities that are coming up within the lifespan waiver. That'll be, we have until I think the end of 2014 to do, or excuse me, 2024 to do this work. I'm not sure where that lines up with like the lifespan waivers actualization, but there's a real opportunity to kind of test this theory. Next slide, please. There's a lot of ways that folks can get involved, but mostly if you have young people that you're working with intellectual or developmental disabilities between the ages of 14 and 25, send them our way. We have an Instagram, we have a Facebook at @YSAP_DRM. Our website is listed there, as well as a number that anyone, adults or young people, can call or text to connect with me and get more information about the project. Keep an eye out if you're living in Maine for posters around your community. We're doing a lot of outreach via flyering through social media, and we'd love any sort of direct contact from anyone that's interested in learning more or getting involved. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dan and Aiden, for your wonderful overview. Next slide, please. Okay, it's poll time, and we'd like to get a sense from all of the folks attending today's webinar. What is the #1 challenge for the service system in supporting enriched community inclusion? Options for this poll are providing less restrictive residential options consistent with the settings rule, meaningful inclusive leisure activity, transportation, variety of social or leisure options in rural areas, community awareness and attitudes around disability, or other if you've identified something that isn't included in one of those above. Miranda, can you guide us through responding to this poll?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to launch the poll. It should show up on your screen here momentarily. So feel free to choose your choice for the #1 challenge. And I'm going to leave that up for about 30 more seconds to allow folks to submit their answers. We have about 40% participation and climbing very quickly. So thank you,
Wow.
everyone. Wonderful. We're already over 70% participation. Just wait a few more seconds and any last words. Wow. Great response on this one, over 80%. Doug.
Wow, excellent. So are we able to see what the results?
I am ending the poll and sharing the results right now. You should
All
be able
right.
to see those results here.
Oh, well, thanks everybody for responding. It looks like transportation comes out as the top one. It often is. The community awareness around attitudes and disability and a variety of social and leisure options comes up second, followed very closely by meaningful inclusive leisure activity and providing less restrictive residential options. Well, actually, other was scored higher than the less restrictive options, but very, very helpful. Thank you everybody for responding. And thank you, Miranda, for helping us with this poll. Clearly, this feedback is relevant to each of today's presenters and relevant to their visions for innovation. Next slide, please. Now, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our next speaker, Brett Bulmer, the Director of Programs with Independence Association. Brett, again, welcome to this platform and thank you for agreeing to join us today.
Oh, thank you very much, Doug. It's great to be here. And before I even start, I want to just do a quick shout out to members of my team that I know are participating in this webinar today. I'm constantly impressed by your intelligence, your creativity, and most importantly, your commitment and dedication to the people we support. This project has been a team effort, and it's a great team. And I'm really wanting to just let you know that I appreciate all the work you're doing. All right, let's move on to our first slide, please. So we are building a web-based community integration application or app. The Activity Board app will provide an accessible HCBS-compliant way for the people we support to learn about activities available in their communities and to sign up and participate in those activities. The individuals we serve will be able to access the app on either touchscreen devices that are installed in each one of our settings or on their own personal devices. And one thing I want to mention is I think our project was initially called the My Community Link project. And we were so proud of ourselves. We spent so much time coming up with a name and even used some artificial intelligence to come up with something. And after we named it, we found out that there was a transportation service in the area with that same name. So we figured that would be confusing. So we decided at that point, to do what we should have done right from the beginning. We went to the people we support and said, what do you want to call this? And they came up with the name Activity Board. That's what they wanted. So that's what we're going to call it. Next slide, please. So problems to address, and these aren't really problems, but these are just some of the things we had to look at. It wasn't that long ago that many of us embarked on this journey that we now simply refer to as HCBS. And that is where we had to bring our settings into compliance with Maine's expectations related to the federal home and community-based settings global rule. We quickly learned that HCBS touched on every facet of service delivery. But one area that we looked at, and many of you did as well, is how we approach supporting people and being part of their communities, integrating into their communities, participating in their communities. There were so many things we had to look at. For example, we had to make sure that we were offering activities that were in non-disability specific settings. We wanted to make sure that we were offering age-appropriate activities, activities that were aligned with the goals, interests, and preferences of the individuals that we support. To the fullest extent possible, offering staff choice, offering people that we support choice of who they spend their time with during those activities, and generating individual schedules, as you know, is one of the requirements of HCBS. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges we faced as we were developing these systems, and every agency went about it a different way, but I think most of us ended up with some sort of a bulletin board system where people sign up for activities. I'm sure we had a lot of the same experiences, some of the challenges or issues that we faced was, number one, accessibility. We have folks that can't read. We have folks that have visual impairments, other physical impairments that might interfere with their ability to utilize a scheduling system. Another thing that we saw was that our schedules and calendars were fragmented across multiple programs. In our case, we have 3 community support settings and 10 homes. And in some cases, programs had their own activity calendars as far as what they were doing, what was going on in their communities. And we realized that some of the folks we support were missing out on some things because they weren't seeing all of these activities in one place. No centralized transportation and staffing coordination was something that we've noticed was a challenge for us. And I'll give you an example where that comes in handy. Let's say you have a home with 3 individuals and there's a concert going on in the park that night, and one of the folks there wants to go, but the other 2 don't, and there's only 1 staff on duty. What do? Well, nobody goes. But what we wanted to take advantage of was maximizing our transportation staffing resources. The truth is, across town in another one of our homes, you might have a group of people that want to go to the concert as well, and they have 2 staff on duty. And in that home, that staff person is taking those individuals to the concert, not even aware that there's an individual over here in the first home that wanted to go. So what we wanted to do is come up with a system for maximizing those resources so that people can get out and do more things. We wanted to make sure one of the challenges we had was collecting accurate data about the activities that were offered, chosen, and declined, so we could notice trends, find out what people really like to do and don't want to do. And then we also had a limited feedback system. What we were doing is probably what some other agencies were doing, is maybe once a month we would have an activity committee meeting where folks would get together and talk about what they were doing, the activities that were being offered, what they wanted to do. But those meetings were limited to the people that were present that day. Maybe it was several weeks after an activity took place, and that maybe they couldn't really remember what they did or the details about it. We wanted a system where everybody could participate in providing feedback, and they could do it quickly and promptly. Next slide, please. So innovative strategies, we've started, even before the app is not even ready yet, but we have started making some organizational changes to support the app. One thing we did, and it was really big, was we merged our residential community support and in-home support departments to maximize those transportation and staffing resources. Prior to this, these programs worked and operated kind of in silos. And we thought, well, we're missing out on a lot of opportunities there by not sharing staff, by not sharing transportation resources. Another thing we did is we created a community integration manager position, or a SIM. And this is a person whose sole responsibility would be to facilitate this app, to find and research activities to enter into it, and to make sure that people are getting where they want to go. And we have also developed a manual or a paper agency-wide activity calendar that kind of mirrors how the app will function. Basically it's an activity catalog that we distribute on a regular basis, and it's laid out just like the app. Next slide, please. Some features of the app: we have individualized profiles and privacy settings, use of photos, clip art, icons, high contrast colors. There's a pinch and zoom feature, a read aloud feature for people that can't read. There's a feedback function. There's going to be a system where activities are tagged with goals and interests of the individuals. They can sign up very easily by clicking on a button. They can see others that are signed up if the others have agreed to that. They can view the staff assigned to the activity. The signups will go to the SIM, or the community integration manager, to coordinate the staffing and the transportation. There'll be reports that can be generated to show what people have done, and then we'll be able to print off individual calendars. Next slide, please. What we hope to learn, we want to gain a better understanding of what individuals actually want to do and how to support them in taking more ownership of those activities. We want to learn more about how to truly engage people in their communities and to use their interests to build relationships. And we want to learn more about how to adjust services moving forward. Next slide, please. If you're interested in participating, 2 things I would say. Number one, we're always looking for more information about great community opportunities. So if you have resources or ideas about community connections or activities in the Brunswick area, let us know. And if you have other questions or just want to talk to me about this project, go ahead and email me at @iaofmaine.org. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Brett. and for sharing this innovation with us. And next slide, please. And to follow Brett, we're pleased to welcome Liz Hansen, the project lead for Living Innovations work to support increased options with less restrictive living options. Liz has experience working with people that have disabilities, including TBI, IDD, and autism since 2014. Liz has an associate degree in behavioral health studies, a BA in psychology, and will be receiving her degree of Master of Social Work from Virginia Commonwealth University this month. She began as a case manager for Living Innovations in 2019. After moving to Virginia in 2020, she continued to work in the IDD field as a case manager. And now, recently in 2021, Liz came back to work remotely for Living Innovations and has since supported various projects. Liz, I will now place the proverbial microphone in your capable hands.
Thank you, Doug. So we can go to the next slide. So the goal of our project, which is opening the door to shared living, is to develop a tiered shared living model by assisting the person, the SLO provider, and team with additional support. This may include direct support hours, so additional direct support hours. Also clinical expertise and training from a clinician, such as a board certified behavior analysis, licensed clinical social worker, or licensed professional counselor. The focus would be to develop training specific to the person, positive support plans and functional assessments that the team could be trained on, included in a specific mental health diagnosis focused on the person and not a generalized overview. Other aspects include trauma-informed training from a trust-based relational interventionist for those that have experienced trauma. Over time, the goal is to reduce that higher level of support to a lower level of support to make a sustainable environment for the person and the provider. The tiers to be examined, which aren't yet concrete, they're still being defined as we collect data and evaluate as we go along, but would be tier 1, someone would have no additional support. So thinking of someone that's very independent. Tier 2 would be someone with some additional needs, but relatively independent. While tier 3 and tier 4 would be someone with higher complex behavioral health needs that would receive the clinical support and additional support hours, as well as specific training. The difference between 3 and 4 is that the difference of hours of allotted. Next slide, please. So people diagnosed with intellectual developmental disabilities and or autism that have received or higher complex behavioral health needs are often regulated to more congregate settings. And many people don't always have the option to live in a shared living option or a less restrictive environment where a community based. So without the needed support and training, many people that do transition or are at risk of going to a group home don't have the training, education, or supports that are needed to really promote meaningful engagement at home and in the community. So one of the problems is that we need more support for not just providers, but for the person in general. Next slide, please. So background of the problem. So ODS did partner with the National Center for START Services, and they did identify some gaps in the system. And there was an estimation of 8,137 people that were eligible for IDD services in Maine, also had behavioral health support needs. And the findings did conclude that there was a need to improve a lot of the IDD and community services, including the expertise, training, and education across the system, and less reliance on restrictive interventions, psychotropic medications, and the lack of resources for mental health needs, including trauma. Next slide. And so what we proposed is to begin supporting people with being able to fulfill their dreams at home and in the community, offer the option to move to a more cost-effective community-based living option, enable people to be able to live safely and meet the independence that works for them in a community-based option by increasing the supports and education for their teams and being able to provide specialized resources rather than generalized overviews, and explore how the quality of services and where we can enhance them to meet the person's needs, the goals and wants that they have. Improve health and safety across various dimensions, including the reduction of behavioral health interventions and behavioral medications, and reduce the amount of crisis calls, police intervention, emergency room visits, and reportable events. Next slide. So towards sustainability. So the sustainability of the grant requires us to identify expert clinicians to support with the completion of the positive support plans, as well as develop the specific trainings for the person. The goal is to have the team, the provider, and the person trained on implementation of all strategies. Develop specialized training by the clinician or subject matter expert. We're also planning to record the recordings so that it follows the person, even if they choose to leave the agency. Many times people supported have a trauma history, so we are working on trainings with a trust-based relational interventionist to support providers with learning strategies and tools to support someone that may have trauma. We're also, over time, the goal is to reduce the higher level of support to a lower level of support to make a sustainable environment for the person, as well as increase the success of a transition, or for those that are at risk of higher acuity care to be able to maintain their current living status. Next slide. So what we hope to learn. So there's a lot of things we hope to learn, but this is the bigger, broader overview of what we hope to learn. So discover whether incorporating comprehensive strategies will increase the success of living in a less restrictive environment. How shared living can be sustainable for people of all needs by incorporating true person-centered practices, so increasing community engagement, additional positive supports, and specific training developed for the teams to follow the person, and looking at the person holistically, so all the needs, wants, and goals that they have as well. So next slide. And if you'd like to participate or know someone that would benefit from this opportunity, you can reach myself, Elizabeth Hansen, at ehansen@liveinnovations.com, or Amanda Parker at aparker@liveinnovations.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And next slide, please. And now it's time for another break in the presentations to check in with our webinar participants. Betsy, how are we doing on the question front?
Thanks, Doug. We do have a couple questions. The first one is targeting Dan Kip. Going back to your presentation, if your initiative will be collaborating with the group in Maine, speaking up for us, or how you'll be collaborating.
Yeah, absolutely. We are definitely collaborating with SUFU, speaking up for us on this. They've been an integral part of my learning in this, about coming into this movement. And then also, so that chapter structure where we're starting youth self-advocacy chapters comes directly from SUFU. That's something that they do. They've been doing for decades. They just don't have any that are youth specific. So getting a lot of technical assistance from them on how to facilitate those sorts of groups. And then also connecting with participants and board members and staff at SUFU who have expressed interest in serving as kind of like mentors or role models for not only Jahim and Aiden, but for the participants that are going to be taking part in our group. Self-advocates who are above the age of 25, who are excited about that part of their life and want to kind of give a little bit of a roadmap to younger folks who are maybe newer to self-advocacy. So there might be some role for mentorship and that kind of like one-to-one relationship.
Thanks, Dan. The next question is for the Innovation for Independence Association. If somebody on your team can answer the question that said, any thought to building natural supports within communities to increase access to activities?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, somebody speaking?
Just you. You're fine.
Sorry. No, absolutely. And this is something that we would be looking at even if we weren't developing this app. I think this is always a worthy objective. And we do have folks that have many natural supports. Something we're always looking to build on and improve. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Another question came in, which I see was answered in the chat, which is somebody seeing if it would be available to others other than people receiving services from Independence Association, and the response has already been given that it would only be available for people receiving the Independence Association is serving. So lots of interest in that. That's great. That's all we have for questions right now, Doug. I think we can move ahead.
Okay, thank you, Betsy, and thank you to today's participants for your questions. We'll come back to remaining questions at the end of today's presentations. Next slide, please. We're very pleased to be working with Roland Paulette, the project manager for Momentum's innovation related to reliable transportation to work. Roland has been working in the field for about 25 years with children's services, adults with IDD, adults with severe mental illness, adults with brain injury, and elderly with Alzheimer's and dementia. Roland, we're excited to hear more about Momentum's innovation and give you the floor.
Great. Thank you, Doug. I wanted to just take a second to also recognize the team at Momentum that has really been working hard on this project for about 10 months and getting it to the point where we have started the services as of last month in July. Next slide. So the project for Momentum is to identify 8 to 12 at-risk participants who are receiving work supports, but also are experiencing transportation challenges. These participants will be trained, mentored, and monitored in the use of Uber's market-based transportation service, as well as self-directing their NET payment options. Momentum will train and mentor participants in transportation safety for the course of this project as well. We'll be developing program protocols and materials as needed, establishing a memorandum of understanding with Uber, recruiting program participants from clients across Momentum service locations. So we're looking at covering Southern Maine and also covering Central Maine out of our Bangor office. Establish accounts for payment of Uber transportation by the client from within the Uber hailing app. Next slide. We're going to be, we've trained clients and natural supports in the use of the Uber hailing app. So we're kind of looking at a team approach, and so we're training the participants as well as any natural supports that they might have, or people that that they might be living with. If a client was referred to this program and they didn't have a device or a cell phone, there were monies built into the grant where we could provide a cell phone or a device with service so that they could participate. Staff has been performing pre-program assessments of employer opinions and client opinions regarding sufficiency and reliability of transportation services, and has compiled the data from that. Again, we initiated a soft start to the project, and we had our staff providing ride-alongs with clients so that they could get comfortable using the Uber app and the Uber transportation system. And then we'll be performing post-program assessments of employer opinions and client opinions regarding their use of the Uber app and the Uber program. Staff will then submit and prepare the final report and for submitting to ODES. Next slide. So the problem to address that I'm sure all of us have experienced is that for years the NET, or the non-emergency transportation system, has faced massive logistical and driver retention challenges, and the COVID era has really expanded those challenges. And a lot of times the companies that are providing the drivers and the services have responded in part by increasing the number of clients a driver might transport on any given trip. So they may pick up a person for a community supports program, then they're picking up a person for work supports. And if the community support program participant gets dropped off first, many times that means that the work supports person may be late for work. And the current NET system, it allows a up to an hour window for a person to arrive at their destination. So that, for any of us would mean that we'd be arriving to work possibly up to an hour late, and we can see what those problems would create. So that's not going to work for the employer, and it's not going to work for the participant as well. And through Momentum's internal review, we've determined that as 54% of the individuals that we support in employment services have significant job-related difficulties due to transportation and the unreliability of the NET system. So over half the time that a person with work supports is trying to either get to work or get home from work, there is either a late ride, or sometimes the ride itself doesn't show up, and the participant is not notified in time to obtain some other form of transportation to get to work. Next slide. So the impact of this issue is that there's these critically important employment opportunities are compromised by repeated no-shows or constant tardiness by the NET dependent clients. And again, it's not anything on their part, it's just the transportation piece itself is not getting them to work on time. And again, even more damaging is the erosion of the client's opportunities and sense of belonging due to an unreliable transportation system. Next slide. So we focused on refining a novel solution that bypasses the structural challenges of Maine's NET sector, and particular focus on practical solutions that are market-based. We're using the same method of transportation that the rest of the community uses and utilizes if they need a ride somewhere and they don't have their own vehicle. And again, we're using the on-demand hailing services such as Uber to provide reliable, prompt, safe, cost-effective, and pre-scheduled employment-related transportation. Next slide. We went to, it also proposes an expansion of self-directed options so that the client is involved in how their transportation money is being utilized and spent, taking out the middleman of the current NET transportation providers. We're also involving the team and using the SIP and PCP process so that the clients can self-monitor their transportation budgets. Next slide. What we hope to learn is that the use of market-based transportation systems can result in reduction of transportation-related employment challenges by 80% or more. Again, with currently 54% of Momentum clients have significant NET-related employment challenges. The use of market-based transportation services can incorporate the structure, safety features, and operating parameters for client-operated, Momentum-monitored, reliable, market-driven NET system, and that Momentum can train, mentor, and monitor participants in how to use and pay for market-based NET services. Next slide. Again, we'll be training and monitoring participants in self-directing their transportation budgets. We have established a partnership with Uber, and we do have an MOU in place. They are providing technical support and also giving us some ideas on how to incorporate what's known as their voucher program, so that we can use that money and track that money to make sure it's not being misspent, and that the use of market-based systems may have a cost savings over traditional NET services to the state of Maine. Next slide. How to participate? You can contact me at the above information, or you can contact Deja Wilcox again at the information there.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Roland, and thanks for joining us today. And let's go to the next slide, please. So to share the vision of Rehab Without Walls project today, we've had a bit of a late roster change. Christine Martin will not be able to join us today, so Janet Keith will do the honors. Janet, thank you for joining us today, and I will pass the baton off to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I hope you can see me. I have my video on.
You're coming in loud and clear, so thank you.
Okay. Well, I am honored to be representing Christine today. Christine is definitely an innovator in the world of neuro rehab. Rehab Without Walls is so thrilled to be awarded this grant for filling a need for brain injury survivors in the state of Maine that are Maine Care members. Next slide. We provide specialized and intensive neurorehabilitation services to survivors of acquired or traumatic brain injury. This includes both pediatric and adult patients. All the services that we provide are in a patient's own home and community and can closely match the intensity of inpatient neurorehabilitation. Under the grant, we have been awarded the ability to provide up to 16 hours of skilled neurorehabilitation to participants under the grant. This includes individualized treatment by physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, clinical social work, and consulting neuropsychology. And as part of our teams, we have a clinical coordinator as well, who is the connection to the person's other medical and community-based providers. We are CARF accredited in brain injury services across the country. We have served Maine Care recipients. So far, we are on grant recipient number 8 at this point in time. Next slide. So the brief project overview is that comprehensive rehabilitation is provided in the patient's natural familiar environment. It's based upon ecological validity, the degree to which the task demands and the rehabilitation are joined in a patient's everyday environment. It allows for training and practice in the environment where the patient utilizes the skills. It also gives support to family members, friends, and any other caregivers that are providing support to the patient. This is real life, and this is therapy that happens in the person's real life. Our program has been operational outside of Maine Care in Maine since 2020 and in New Hampshire since 2022. We are also operating programs like this in 17 states throughout the country. Outcomes in this program greatly surpass that of more traditional outpatient or home health therapies for survivors of brain injuries, both from transitioning from both acute hospital, acute rehabilitation, subacute care, and those struggling in the community. Next slide. So the problems that we are hoping to address are creating shorter hospital and rehab hospital stays where Caregivers feel very supported in the transition of taking someone with a more complex neurological injury home. Sometimes patients will do and say anything to go home, and caregivers often do not remember all the skills that they are taught about how to move someone, feed someone, perform their self-care, keep them safe, what 24/7 supervision means, etc. So, the environment and structure in inpatient settings are very different from home, and people have difficulty, especially patients with brain injuries, translating what's safe in the hospital to what's safe at home. There is no specialized neuropediatric rehab program in the state of Maine. Pediatric patients from Maine leave Barbara Bush Children's Hospital. They go to places like Kennedy Krieger, Spalding Rehabilitation, Franciscan Children's Hospital, and other hospitals throughout the East Coast for their rehabilitation. The state of Maine has several specialized skilled nursing facilities for brain injury survivors under Section 67, as well as specialized neuro outpatient programs under Section 102, but there are no specialized home and community-based rehab programs to help bridge the gap in between those services. Brain injury rehab is different than traditional rehabilitation services provided at other more generalized agencies. Next slide. Right now, there are extensive wait lists for both brain injury waiver services as well as outpatient neuro rehab services. Many patients are being sent out of state for specialized rehab or residential placement following brain injuries. Some of these services don't kick in immediately after the patient's initial injury, and we're trying to bridge the gap so that patients don't have to wait for specialized neuro rehab supports and therapy. And many patients are stuck in hospital settings due to lack of specialized and intensive rehab services following acute hospitalization or acute rehab hospitalization. Next slide. So some of the proposed innovative strategies are to give this home and community-based neurorehabilitation model to survivors of acquired and traumatic brain injury who are Maine Care members. Rehab services can be intensive and highly specialized, up to 16 hours per week of that choice of therapy services, PT, OT, speech, clinical coordination, social work, neuropsychological oversight. And we are treating these Maine Care members up to 12 weeks. Individual program recommendations made after completion of a free pre-admission screen that is completed after the referral was received. So the patient, the family, and grant administrators can see how many hours of specialized services were recommended per the individual's needs. Next slide. So there's extensive patient and caregiver education and support provided throughout the plan of care. Clinical coordination is provided to support the transition to other levels of care, outpatient services, or onto the next steps. We can make sure that people are connected with community-based providers for vocational rehabilitation, any Meals on Wheels, and other community supports that they may need. And we're collecting outcomes on each individual as well as the project as a whole to report back to the grant. Next slide. What we hope to learn, since we've been operating this program in Maine since 2020, we hope to provide members with these specialized services that they would not otherwise have had access to following a catastrophic brain injury. We'll be collecting and sharing both individual and whole project outcomes data as they relate to the supervision needs and support needs of the person, their functional independence, reduction in rehospitalizations, and reduced need for long-term supports to prove the effectiveness and the long-term savings. And we're also hoping that with these rehab hospital transitions from out of state, that someone really can receive rehabilitation out of state and come back to Maine and feel supported in their home and community as they leave out of state rehab hospitals. Next slide. These are just our referral numbers, Christine's number, employment opportunities within Rehab Without Walls, and for any general contact or inquiries, you can either reach out to Christine or myself, Janet Keith. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much, Janet, and truly great job of pinch hitting today. So have a great rest of your day. And in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and skip ahead through what we'd previously had scheduled as a poll to our next introduction. So next slide, there we go. And to share the vision of Skills Incorporated's driver education program today, we're very excited to introduce Kristen Overton, Skills Incorporated's Executive Director. Kristen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Skills is a nonprofit organization, and we are located in St. Albans, Maine, primarily serving Somerset, Kennebec, and Penobscot counties. And next slide. Skills Inc., our driver education program, it really starts with a driver assessment. And so we'll be working with some partners, including Alpha One, and to develop and complete a driver assessment in order to determine whether an individual has the cognitive, operational, technical, tactical, and strategic competencies to safely drive, including whether any assistive devices would be required. Right now, in order to have a driver assessment, if it is not part of the vocational rehabilitation process, it's $500 out of pocket. And if a high-tech evaluation is required, then it's at least double that and sometimes more. And so our project really revolves around taking a look at individuals' abilities at this time to potentially have driving be an option for them, and then working to actually develop and hold driver's education courses. So Skills Inc. Driver's Education Coordinator, Darren Sherrier, he will be working with individuals to determine learning needs and making recommendations on which driver education locations might best fit those needs. Of course, individual maintains the right to choose a driving school, but really where our driver's education program differs is that what we've heard or found from many years past when Skills Inc. had a driver education program is that people are able to go through driver's education and to get their permit. However, they may not have access to a vehicle to be able to practice in, or they may not have someone there who's a licensed driver who's able to practice with them. And in order to achieve your license, to be able to even go for your test, you need to have at least 80 hours of practice time, 10, and only 10 of that is part of the driver's education course. And so the Skills Inc. Driver's Education Project will make that available with an instructor if it's needed for an individual taking the class. So if someone takes our driver's education program and does not have a licensed driver and a vehicle that they're able to get those practice hours in, then we would make sure that they had all of those hours. Next slide. So I thought it was very interesting. The poll that was had earlier, that lack of transportation came up as one of the most significant barriers, because as we all know, lack of transportation has been long cited as a significant barrier to integrated and independent living in Maine, especially in the rural parts of the state like St. Albans, where no public transportation exists or is likely to exist. Transportation agencies can experience driver shortages and are only able to provide the medical or waiver service related transportation. But transportation is a crucial aspect of daily life in Maine. And so allowing people to reach their destinations, participate in the community, and to maintain their independence. And so this is a barrier that many individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, traumatic brain injuries, and other related conditions often face, which really hinders their abilities to lead fulfilling, integrated lives. So providing driver's education to these people has the potential to really break down the barriers and improve quality of life. Next slide, please. So our strategies are really that obviously we want to make driving evaluations available to adult waiver members on sections 18, 19, 20, 21, and 29, regardless of their ability to pay. So if someone in the past has wanted to have a driver evaluation but does not have did not have the funds to be able to do that, then this is something that would be an appropriate referral, and that is how we will begin the process. And then we'll be providing driver's education in small groups, whereas normal driver's education classes are up to 30 individuals in a classroom. We'll be providing small group driver education programs that are teaching the skills and the knowledge necessary to obtain a driver's license. And as I had mentioned before, providing all the practice time required when no family member is available in order to meet that requirement. Next slide. Additionally, we will work with other driver's education programs in order to, because there are many in the state, and working with them in order to make sure that to talk about potential partnerships, to be able to expand their comfort regarding any kind of different learning styles that may be necessary, or working with them if it's possible that someone needs some supports in order to attend one of their classes. So we will be reaching out and working with other transportation education programs as well in order to kind of develop a network across the state of education classes for people, again, who are on the waivers 18, 19, 20, 21, and 29. And really our goal is just break down those transportation barriers for the individuals who have needs in order to be able to lead those more fulfilling lives out more independently in the community with the transportation. Next slide. And so what the things that we really hope to learn in our pilot is really how prevalent the need is for evaluation and or education. We don't really know how many individuals have gone through or are looking to go through this. The success rate of those identified as potential versus those where driver's ed may not be a viable option at this time. The identified barriers to achieving a license or a permit. The success rate of achieving a permit and a license, and also the impact of reducing the number of individuals who feel dependent on other people or publicly funded transportation. Next slide, please. So how you can participate is you can join our mailing list. More information will be coming soon about our driver's education program. We are in the process of obtaining our license right now, and then refer members, waiver members after September 1. And then this is the contact information for our driver education coordinator.
Thank you very much, Kristen. And it was nice to have you back on this platform again. And next slide, please. And with our final presentation today, Alan Cobo-Lewis will share information on the University of Maine's innovation in enhanced behavior support. Alan is an associate professor of psychology and the director of the Center for Community Inclusion and Disability Studies with the university. We're very pleased to have you here today, Alan, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Doug. And thank you to ODES and NDI and all the other presenters. It was really wonderful to hear about the innovation and the other projects. I'm however going to get right to it because I think we're about 10 minutes behind and I don't want to keep people longer than they planned. So I just want to acknowledge that I'm presenting today, and I'm the lead on the project, but really the heart of the project is our Sarah Howarth, Leanne Millender, and Kimberly Mills, all of whom are doctoral level board certified behavioral analysts, which I'm not. So can I go to the next slide, please? For a brief overview of the project. So the idea is to have evidence-based behavioral consultation, applied behavior analysis, rooted in the rights of adults to make choices about their lives, the idea is to promote effective communication and other behaviors and effective behavior modifications, other supports, especially to increase the access of people on the waivers to the community, and to lessen the use of more restrictive interventions. And if we can go right to the next slide on problem to address. Thank you. So the problems to address. There are people in the state who are on HCBS waivers, especially section 21, but also maybe 29 and some of the other waivers, in restrictive behavior management plans or at risk for being put on restrictive behavior management plans. So that's a problem. The access to the community can sometimes be limited, both by the plans that people are on, and by the behaviors that they engage in, or the other responses that their team might have to the behaviors they engage in. So the skill level of DSPs to respond productively and to give lots more choices and lots of communicative opportunities to people on the waivers is also another problem that we really want to directly address in this project. So next slide, please, for the innovative strategies. So the big innovative strategy, or one of the big innovative strategies, is really intensive behavioral consultation by BCBA. And when I say intensive, I mean up to 6 hours a week, which is significantly higher than the 16.5 hours per year that's in the current 21 waiver. So we don't know that everyone would need this level of support, but we would be prepared to provide this level if it's necessary for an intensive period of time, and including appropriate things like a functional behavior analysis, et cetera. I think this is a significant innovation, at least in the context of an HCBS waiver, though it's less innovative in the context of private health insurance, and perhaps especially innovative for services to adults versus children. Another innovation is that we will be offering online training for direct service providers toward achieving a registered behavioral tech and RBT credential, and that we be providing stipends to DSPs in this training, because it can be a significant amount of additional training that they would be asked to undergo. And in addition, the behavior analysts on the team, or one of them, Sarah in particular, would be providing support over Zoom, to the DSPs getting trained. Next slide, please. So what do we hope to learn? So we want to know, how much does this approach reduce the use of intrusive interventions, including but not limited to behavior management plans? How much can we increase the quality of life? We plan on having independent evaluators administer a structured assessment of quality of life and see to what extent we can move that positively. How much can we actually improve access to the community? How much do the skills of people supported by the HCBS waiver increase? Because we would like them to engage in to learn skills, including communication skills, that are more effective at getting them what they want than disruptive behaviors might be. And to what extent are they able to do that? How well do the DSPs actually achieve the RBT consequences, the RBT competencies? And last slide is how to participate. So at the time that I submitted the bullets for this slide, we did not yet have a wait list. And as of a meeting this morning, we have a wait list. But there could always be attrition, and we could also free up capacity depending on the level of support that the people currently enrolled are going to need. So you should still, if you're interested, email the co-investigator, which is Sarah Howarth. I'll put her email in the chat. And with any questions you might have about participating, hang on, I'm just putting this in the chat now, everybody. We would need to know the name of the person you can have, of course, anonymous without identifying information, initial queries. But if you're interested, if you are a person that you support are interested in participating, we would ultimately need to know the name of this person supported by the waiver, their guardian if they have a guardian, the name of the lead DSP, what county they're in, agency supporting them, case manager, and the advocate contact information, whether they're on a behavior management plan or a positive support plan, and what waiver is supporting them. And I've got a minute left, and I think that's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Alan, and congratulations on filling your participant group, and good luck to you in the next year and a half with the project. We look forward to watching your work. So, next slide, please. If you have any questions, if anybody on this webinar has any questions that we haven't addressed, please send them to us by email, and we will respond to them. And now to take us out, I'm very happy to turn this back over to you, Miranda.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Wonderful questions. I did put in the chat our innovation email if you come up with any questions or need any contact information. I've also just put in the chat our innovation pilot grants webpage. You can go there to review the recordings of previous sessions or get copies of the PowerPoints with the contact information for our presenters, as well as the link to our wonderful partners with the National Disability Institute. And I believe Betsy has a few words she'd like to say.
I just really quickly want to thank everyone for your projects, for sharing your projects. We've had a lot of questions about them, and that's really why we wanted to have these webinars. We're posting them on our website. We're getting a lot of traffic there. We're also presenting on this the innovation work that we're doing at HCBS conference at the end of this month. So there's interest from out of state as well. So thanks again for your joining us today, and especially thanks to all the presenters for coming today, and of course for our partners at NDI. Hope you all have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. I will end the webinar. Have a great day.